Hey everyone, before we start the show, I just want to get some plugs out of the way. If you enjoy this podcast and you're into wrestling, check out the Nerds and Marks podcast or Marty and Sarah Love Wrestling. If you're not getting your fill on movie and entertainment discussion, then check out the Entertainment Buffet podcast. If you want to dive into the world of video games, I highly recommend the Darkcast by my friends over at darkstation.com. Listen to them cover important topics and interview men and women from all over the industry. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Hello everyone and welcome to today's mini episode. I am your host, Jeremy Meyer. So we definitely have a superhero themed show today. First of all, we're going to be talking about the script that we're going to be discussing on Friday. Then I'm going to have a little review for you, a not long one. And then I'm going to do another top 10 list, which if you can see by the title will be my top 10 comic book movies. I've already done my top 10 just Marvel cinematic movies. This is going to be all comic book movies ever made. Anything based on a comic, a graphic novel, anything like that. So some of those movies will be appearing again, and a lot of them will be different ones, which you can probably guess some of them. But yeah, so today we're first going to talk about the script that we're going to be discussing on Friday, which is going to be a superhero script. And it's going to be one that has come up on the show many times. It's often the example that I've used for the podcast, but it's not a script we've covered yet. And I think it's time to rectify that. There's a couple of those scripts that have been mentioned that are going to be covered this week and one next week. But this week, we are going to be talking about Superman Lives, which is the Kevin Smith version of Superman Lives, the one that he has talked about many times. If you've seen his Evening with Kevin Smith DVD, he's never stopped talking about it since it happened, as you know, Kevin Smith loves to talk. So that's what we're going to be covering. I've already read it. It's actually very interesting, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. So we're going to be talking about Superman Lives. You can find that script on our Tumblr, shelledfilmpodcast.tumblr.com. But yeah, if you're a Superman fan, if you're a Kevin Smith fan, definitely don't miss that episode. If you're a comic book fan, I think it's a piece of movie history, so much so that they made a documentary about it, and apparently they're working on another documentary based on the never-made Justice League movie, which we will be discussing at some point this year as well. I think you can guess what point that'll be. So yeah, this week, Superman Lives. So let's go into my little review that I have for you today. It's not long, but I finally sat down and watched Furious 7 this weekend. Now, The Fate of the Furious just came out. It fucking broke box office numbers like you wouldn't believe. It's amazing how this awesome action movie, this insane action movie with such a diverse cast, has become one of the biggest franchises of all time. And it's, I attributed a lot of Seven's success to, these movies are great, in my opinion, but I attributed a lot to, Paul Walker passing away, and everybody kind of wanted to see his last movie and see how they were going to Frankenstein it together from what they had filmed, and I finally got my chance to see that this weekend. I had put it off for a long time. I knew it was going to be hard to watch just because of that. So I've always been a huge fan of the Fast and Furious franchise. I even really liked 3, Tokyo Drift, which was a spinoff and then got roped into the franchise proper. That's honestly one of my favorite ones. But I think these movies are just great, fun, dumb action movies. And by the time 5 and 6 came around, they had fully embraced that. And those are, like, Fast 5, I will spoil here, is still my favorite of the franchise. It's because it's crazy, but it's still, like, down to earth, and it's just the best written one, and it's so great. But 6, I liked 6. I thought it was a little worse than 5. They definitely went a little too, like, the plane part at the end is kind of what brought it down for me. Just how long that runway must have been is a little ridiculous. But it's still a very enjoyable movie. It has some amazing action scenes. But I finally saw 7, and 7, at first I was kind of mixed about it. I loved the movie, don't get me wrong. I loved Furious 7. It is so ridiculous. It's so insane. Some of the most insane action scenes I've ever seen in a movie. But like right from the opening, it is amazing. Like Jason Statham in the hospital talking to his brother from the previous movie, and just walking through the hospital and it's all fucked up and destroyed and shot up. It's such a good, it's probably the best intro to any of the movies, and just really sets him up as such a badass. And it just escalates from there. It has some of the best action scenes out of the entire franchise. I still put the safe scene from Fast Five probably at the top, but the convoy scene in 7 is incredible. Just some intense action, some really funny moments with what's his, I can't remember his real name, but the character Roman Pierce. What is his real name? I'm blanking on it. But Ludacris's buddy in the movie. And Tyrese. Tyrese as Roman is great. And then Ludacris's little moment rolling up the window as they're about to unload machine guns on him is really funny. It's just it's one of the most insane action pieces I've ever seen. Like, Vin Diesel just straight up drives off a cliff to get away from these people and just relies on a roll cage to save his life, and it totally works. A lot of the moments in this movie remind me of that scene in The Other Guys with The Rock and Samuel L. Jackson, where they jump off of the building and just fall to their deaths, and everybody's like, nobody knows why they jump. Maybe the ego had gotten to their head and they thought nothing could stop them. Literally, I just feel like multiple times in the movie, Vin Diesel is just like, well, I know I'm invincible, so I'm just going to do this thing and it's going to work out. And often it does. So it's just complete insanity for the whole movie. Driving the car between buildings is hilarious and awesome and totally believable, honestly. Like, I heard a lot of people talking shit about that. Like, I don't know. And I guess there was an article out there where scientists were saying that technically it was possible. But yeah, it's just so off the wall, and it was getting to the point where, to me, I was like, maybe they're too self-aware in this movie. Like, 5, they had nailed the tone and the pace and everything. 6, they kind of ramped it up a little, and I'm like, yeah, it was a little much, but still enjoyable. 7, they just took it to whole new levels, and 8 obviously looks like they do the same. Now I'm dying to see Fate of the Furious. But if you've never watched these movies, and if you've just always kind of brushed them off as stupid movies, or if you think like, oh, I'm not into cars. First of all, they're not car movies. They are action movies. Even the first one, which had more to do with cars, is still just like, these are action movies, and the first one holds up. Like, it's a little dated in the sense that the big plot is like they're stealing DVD players, but so a lot of great stunt work, and just, it's like a decent story. It's like pretty standard, like undercover cop stuff. And it just gets so insane as it goes on. But it definitely, 7 pays tribute to the rest of the movies in a way I never expected. Like, bringing back such minor characters and referencing small things. They really don't. Nobody's asking for this. Like, nobody's asking for them to reference these movies in a way. But they pay such tribute to the whole franchise. It's kind of amazing. And 7 was no different. It's even better than I expected. I highly recommend Furious 7. I highly recommend all of the movies. Even the weakest one, which I think is Too Fast, Too Furious, is still a very entertaining movie. I'll do a quick ranking. I'll put Fast 5 at the top. I will put 7 after that. Then I would probably put Tokyo Drift, just because, like, it's the one I've seen probably the most, and I really love it for a movie that was supposed to be just kind of shrugged off and ended up being really great. Then I'd put the original, and then I'd put 4 Fast and Furious. I would put 6 after 3. And then I would put the original, and then 4 Fast and Furious, and then 2 at the bottom. But again, they're all just so worth watching. I can't wait to see what they do to blow it out in Fate of the Furious. I might try to see that this weekend. I doubt it'll happen. I know everyone's rushing out to see Guardians 2 right now, which I have not seen at this moment. A few friends of mine have seen it, and they've all come back to very positive things. But I hope to see Guardians soon. But at the same time, I'm kind of hoping to see Fate of the Furious soon. But all right, so that's kind of all I got for Fate of the Furious. It's amazing. Just The Rock and Jason Statham fucking each other up in the beginning is one of the highlights for me. It's such a good movie. Just know what you're seeing going in. Like, do not take those movies seriously. But you'll have a lot of fun. Right, so now let's move on to my top 10 comic book movies. As always, I will start from the bottom at number 10. But first, I want to do a couple honorable mentions just because there's so many I like that just, to me, don't place, but still are worth mentioning. 300, I really like. It's kind of the only good time Zack Snyder can make a movie is when he's adapting it page by page, because I actually like Watchmen too. Sin City is just, the art style alone is so crazy. Kick-Ass, I love the first Kick-Ass movie. It's so funny, it's so entertaining. And Punisher Warzone, I think, is highly underrated. That movie is so much fun. And if you read the 2004, 2008 run of Punisher, it totally fits in with the comics. Some of those moments are ripped directly out of the comics, and that's one of my favorite comic runs of all time. So to me, that movie ranks really high. It's definitely better than the first Punisher movie, and 100% worth checking out. So I'm going to start with my number 10 here, and my number 10 is The Crow with Brandon Lee. It's a great movie. It's very poetic. It's very unfortunate that it was his last movie and the circumstances that happened behind that. But it's pretty different from the comic. If you've never read the comic, it is the same story, but just told extremely different. And the comic is way more kind of a lot of the dialogue is poetic. It's almost like he's just reading poetry to everybody as he's killing them. And there's a little bit of that in the movie, but the movie to me is far superior. And I love the comic, I love the movie, but just the music, the Brandon Lee embodies that character and made it his own. Ernie Hudson is really good in that movie, but it's just so entertaining. And it's one that I've seen a lot from childhood and has stuck with me over the years. So, a lot of people probably found this movie when they were teenagers and might make fun of it for that reason. But to me, it still holds up. It's very entertaining. It's very romantic, and I think it's one worth watching. Now, I might get a lot of shit for my number 9, but I don't really care because I love this movie, and it is Watchmen. It's basically panel by panel from the book, and the changes they make, I think, actually improve the story. Because if you ask me, I read the book Watchmen. I loved it. I didn't know anything about it. It was when the movie came out, which I'm sure a lot of people discovered it then. I saw the trailers. I'm like, wow, this looks really crazy. Let me read the book. And I struggled through the book, but I really loved it. And the ending in the book is, I think, so dumb, and I think it makes way more sense in the movie. I think they blow it out of proportion in the movie, where they say that he's attacking multiple cities instead of just the New York as it was in the book. But I guess it makes more sense for the story they're trying to spin. But I will say the director's cut is definitely the version to watch, not the fucking 4-hour ultimate cut where they cut in that cartoon. I didn't need any of that stuff. I didn't need that stuff in the comic, honestly. The whole pirate book thing. But I love Watchmen. Zack Snyder, say what you will about him, he can make a movie look fucking gorgeous, and Watchmen looks incredible. And I think it's a good adaptation. So, I don't really care what anybody else says. I enjoy it. My number 8 is X-Men Days of Future Past, which is my favorite X-Men movie. I think it is the peak of what X-Men movies could be. Apocalypse fell a little short for me, but I am looking forward to this next one. I hope they can pull it out. Apocalypse is still really good, but it's a little overproduced, and just they waste a great villain. Just needed a little better writing, but there are good moments in Apocalypse. But Days of Future Past, to me, is, in my opinion, the best X-Men movie, my favorite X-Men movie, and is just so entertaining. Number 7, Guardians of the Galaxy. It's so original, so unique. Nobody was expecting anything out of this movie, I don't think. I bet a lot of people were going in thinking oh, this is going to be Marvel's first kind of shrug shoulders. But the trailers blew everyone away. We all went and saw it. We all loved it. I've never met a person who said they didn't love and laugh at Guardians of the Galaxy. It's definitely the funniest movie they made. It turned Chris Pratt into a bona fide star. He had that and Jurassic World just so close together. And now that guy, he's the shit. He is what he is. He's great. We all love him. And they just put together such an amazing cast, and James Gunn pulled it out of nowhere. No one was expecting it, and I love Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 6 is Deadpool, which obviously it's so recent. Going rated R, it was perfect for that movie. Ryan Reynolds was perfect for that movie. I really love Deadpool in the comics. The Brian Posehn run in particular, which I think was 2011 or 2014. I guess one of those. I can't remember. It's one of my favorite runs of a comic book series. Just look for the Brian Posehn run. Deadpool's great, and they really captured it in the movie. I was very satisfied as a fan of the comics. I really look forward to Deadpool 2, seeing what they can do when they bring in Cable. Cable and Deadpool is some of the stuff I've read the least. I've always kind of read his solo stuff, so I am going to be looking into some of that before the movie comes out. But yeah, Deadpool was fucking awesome, and it was exactly as long as it needed to be. It was like an hour and 40 minutes. They didn't overstay their welcome. You don't need like a 2.5 hour Deadpool movie. And they made it a small budget, but still did really, like, they did a lot. They accomplished a lot with the money they had. So my number 5 is the first Iron Man. In my opinion, just like a perfect superhero movie. It's definitely one of those ones, like, you go back and watch it now, and you're like, yeah, Robert Downey Jr. was really good, but, like, he definitely finds it more in the sequels. If it's, you go back and watch it now, it feels different because, like, a lot of the Marvel movies nowadays kind of all feel the same. They kind of look the same. Iron Man, it holds up today. It's great. It's, you know, the beginning of what became this huge, like, 20 movie spanning franchise, or however many there are now. And it's awesome. Like, if you don't like Iron Man, I don't know what to tell you, because they fucking nailed it. They made a damn near perfect superhero movie. My number 4 and my favorite of the Marvel Cinematic movies is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I've already talked about it a lot on my top 10 Marvel movies. Same thing with Iron Man. But Captain America: Winter Soldier, it's incredible. Again, a character I cared so little about that they made me care so much about. Great music, great action scenes. Those directors, the Russo brothers, they're nailing it. Winter Soldier and Civil War were both fantastically directed, and them handling the new Avengers movie, I have a lot of faith in them. Number 3 is Batman Begins. Now, again, I would say this is the perfect Batman movie. I know everybody's going to go The Dark Knight, and I will say The Dark Knight is a better movie, and I'm just going to spoil it right here. Dark Knight is my number 2. But Batman Begins is more true to the comics. Like, one thing that kind of irked me going from Batman Begins to The Dark Knight is you look at Gotham in Batman Begins, and that is a perfect interpretation of Gotham. It's a dirty, rundown city that needs the Batman. And then you look at The Dark Knight, and it's Chicago, so it's kind of cool for us Chicago natives. But it looks too clean. It doesn't feel like the same city that was in Batman Begins. And that was one thing that kind of really bothered me. I can't even explain why, but I guess it helps with the look and the feel of that movie. I think the tone of Batman Begins is a lot closer to the comics than what The Dark Knight was. The Dark Knight was just an amazing movie. Christian Bale was elevated to the next level. Obviously, Heath Ledger's the Joker is the best villain to be in any comic book movie ever, and I will just say that right now, and I don't care what anybody says. He won a fucking Academy Award for it, so I think everybody's going to agree with me. And it's very tragic. We never got to see what he was going to do with another one. I guess the rumor was for the next one that Heath Ledger was going to return, and it was going to be around the trial of the Joker, probably introduce Harley Quinn or something like that. I always heard there was also the rumors of the Riddler coming in as like a cyber terrorist, and I really want the Riddler to be done and handled in like a new Batman movie. I want a good version of the Riddler, and I love that idea. And I guess the casting rumor was always Leonardo DiCaprio because it was after Inception, and that would have been awesome. Like, Leonardo DiCaprio was a cyber Riddler, like cyber terrorist Riddler, like hacking people and leaving riddles and shit. That would have been great. The Dark Knight, again, a fucking perfect movie. I can watch that movie a million times. It's one of those ones you turn it on no matter where it's at. You're gonna sit down and watch the whole thing. I don't care what anybody says about Christian Bale's Batman voice. It never bothered me. I do like making fun of it, but overall, I don't care. I think it's great. I think everyone in that movie is great. The speech at the end with Gordon is a fucking fantastic moment. And we got to see Two-Face, like a great version of Two-Face, who's one of my favorite Batman villains. This is a weird thing. My favorite 2 Batman villains are the Riddler and Two-Face. I don't know why. And they're villains that aren't often done correctly. I think I'm just always pining for a version that, like, hey, nail those characters. And Dark Knight did it with Two-Face. And in the comics, they did it with the Riddler in Batman Zero Year. If you never read that, it's a fucking great story with the Riddler as a villain. But I would highly recommend that. So let's go to my number one. I know I kind of blasted two right there, but let's do my number one, which is Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 2. Not specifically Tobey Maguire, but Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man is my favorite superhero. He's my favorite comic. Spider-Man 2 is my favorite superhero movie. I will never forget seeing that movie in the theater. It was a packed house. I saw the first one in theaters and I really liked it, but Spider-Man 2, I was never expecting to be blown away the way I was. Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus is one of my favorite villains ever portrayed on film. Tobey Maguire nailed it in that movie. I would say everybody kind of shits on him, but I think he was fucking great in that movie, and they just did everything right in Spider-Man 2. The action scenes are incredible, and I will never forget the train sequence. The fight on the train leading to him having to stop it. I've never felt so much anxiety in a movie theater. And it's just such a heroic moment, and it's one that'll stick with me forever. And just the music that goes along with that franchise, it was all done so well. I would watch Spider-Man 2 right now. I love those movies so much. I will even defend the third one to a certain extent. I'm not going to try to convince people, but I will say I think there's way more to enjoy about that movie than most people will admit. But Spider-Man 2, it's perfect. I don't even care about him delivering pizzas in the beginning. It's fun. It's funny. I love it. I honestly will say the extended edition, Spider-Man 2.1, brings it down a little for me. I would say just watch the original version, just because the scene in the elevator in particular is one. They do extend some of the fight scenes, which is good, but I don't like the extension of the elevator scene where they're just letting a guy riff some comedy stuff. It's not great. And I would say just, forego the extended edition for just the theatrical cut. But that is my top 10 comic book movies. I mean, we got a bunch more coming this year. Let's see if it changes. Let's see if Wonder Woman is going to change my mind. But the way the DC movies are going, I'm not convinced of that. I am probably going to see that one just because I know everybody's like, oh, if you don't like the movies, don't support them. But it's I want to support them because I want them to think that Wonder Woman is a character worth making a movie about. And even if the movie sucks, I have no idea. I haven't seen it yet. What if it's great? I think the trailers actually look pretty good. It's not like Justice League where I've watched the trailer and it makes me want to vomit. Wonder Woman, the trailers have actually worked for me and I'm interested and I just hope they can pull it out, So I do want to see Wonder Woman. Maybe that'll get added to the list. We'll see how it goes. Just given DC's track record, I am not confident. But I keep bringing this up. I think we're really close to doing what I want to do to cover these DC comic book movies. And once we get some of that recorded, I'm going to bank those so I can release them when I need to. But I'll talk about them when I at least have one recorded. But yeah, that's going to be today's mini episode. So don't forget, Superman Lives on Friday. And then there was my top 10 comic book movies and my review of Furious 7. If you want to follow us on Twitter and Instagram, you can find us at Shelved Podcast. If you want to email the show, you can email us at shelvedfilmpodcast@gmail.com. What are your top 10 comic book movies? Send them to me on the email, and I will read them on the show. But all right, that's going to be it for today's mini episode. Be sure to check back on Friday for Superman Lives, and thanks for listening.